Hit the gavel. You want me to hit it?
Call this to order. If we could, please. I don't have my gavel. I have to. Thank you all for coming. This is like a record attendance. So I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight to learn about our budget. And hopefully together we can answer questions and ask questions and support our kids. We're going to begin with introductions around the room with school board members. Just say that you are and everyone introduce, and then we'll go with administrative staff after that. Starting with Matt.
Emily Birch.
Diane Potter.
Molly Rogers.
Melissa Tracy.
Joanne O'Brien.
Jeff Hanley.
Sean Vogt. Tony Beat.
Jack Pitteroff.
Becky Fless. Select board persons beginning.
Greg Kuchar, West Gardner.
Joe Caputo, Pittston.
Kathy Thomas, Pittston.
Jane Hubert, ditto.
Mark Roberts, Randolph.
Matt Ross, Randolph.
Bob Henderson, Randolph.
Gary Berry, Gardner.
Rusty Greenleaf Gardner.
Matt Martin, Gardner. Kathy Brown, Gardner.
That's everyone on the inner circle. Administrators, please.
Tiffany Cockrell, principal at Pittston Randolph Consolidated School. Vicki Duguay, principal at Riverview Community School.
Karen Moody, principal of Laura Richard School. Lauren Arnold, principal of Gardner Area High School.
Nate Stubbert, Athletic Director.
Katie Gould, principal at Helen Thompson School.
Sarah Sims, principal at Gardner Regional Middle School.
Alicia Morris, director of special services.
Andrea Dish, business manager. Angela Hardy, director of curriculum.
Dave Dowsty, Director of Operations.
Terry McGuire, director of technology. And Pat Hopkins, superintendent.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to have such great representation, and I want to thank our administrators for being here tonight and for your support as we go through our budget process, and any questions or things that you can add. We're appreciative of that.
Okay, I thought we'll start with a PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully all of you grabbed some of the paper that were on the side table. Hot off the presses is the booklet, the budget booklet. Those should be going out in the mailboxes soon. So you get to see what's there first. So first of all, thank you for being here. We really appreciate the opportunity to share with you this budget proposal. We started working on the budget. Staff, they begin putting their budget together in December and making their requests, their recommendations. And then we go through the process behind the scenes until about February, March, in which we then start wrapping the board in. So this was a particularly difficult budget year for lots of reasons. So Terry, do you want to keep flipping through here? Yeah, that's just a weird setup. And I have board members. We have a couple board members who are missing. Linda Kudo's ill. Megan Carlson is out of the country, couldn't be here. And we have two student reps, Alyssa Henderson and Sage Scully. I always like to include a few photos. So just so you can see some of the things that our students are doing. All right, and we've had some successes this year, really exciting. For those of you who may not be aware that this year, the board approved a unified basketball team. And it was amazing. If you didn't have a chance to see it, if you haven't heard about it, encourage you to go to one next year. We had about 3 games, I think, right?
6 total, 3 home.
3 home. And so I wasn't able to make the first one. I made the second one and was told that the attendance in the second game was significantly larger than the first. And then by the third one, it was even larger. It was just so amazing to see all of our students come together and support one another. It was great. We also have our staff award for those of you who know Rick MacArthur. He is our head custodian over at the Pittston Randolph School. He's been with us for years. I don't know how many years. And he was awarded by the Spirit of America Award at the Pittston Town Office. And then we have a couple students, Taylor Takatsu, is a senior this year. And she was the recipient of the Maine Principals Association Award. And then Eli Farias, who was the state champion in his weight class for wrestling. So really excited for him. As I've talked about last year, and in multiple years, we continue to see a little bit of a decline in our enrollment. Overall, since 2014, we've seen a decline of about 224 students. It's a lot. And if you look from last year we had about 34 students that we had decrease throughout the course of the year. This year, we went up and down, and we ended up as of April in just having a decline of 2 students. So maybe that means that there's a little more stability to come, which would be nice. Again, some of our students and staff. So I indicated that this has been a particularly difficult budget process. We received, you can go to the next page, we received about $150,000 additional money in state revenue. However, in order to get the $150,000, we had to pass along to taxpayers an additional $280,000. So ultimately, we were in the hole about $130,000 just to start out. So overall, when we started looking at everything we needed, we were at a $5 million increase. I'd never seen anything quite like that. And so we knew that there were going to have to be some pretty deep cuts. Because that was not the budget that we could bring forward to the taxpayers. So as we look at the next slide, and it talks about what were some of the changes. So what's in the budget? One, our annual salary increases. Like you, I know that you've been struggling with employment and salaries and being competitive. We've had the same issue. We're finding that in some areas, we were just not competitive. And in order to keep some of our staff, we really had to invest in salaries. For example, some of our bus drivers, we were finding that some of the area school districts were paying $5 an hour more than we were, right? You can go down the road a half hour, and as a teacher, you can make $10,000 more a year than here. So once you start making some of those adjustments to salaries, because we want to maintain our staff, then we're going to see a bit of an increase in the salaries, which we are. Health insurance, we're so excited. For those of you who were here last year, I think we were able to tell you that we had a 0% increase in our health insurance last year. And this year, we again kept it really low. The absolute lowest that any district could go was 1.4%, and we came in at 1.6%. So we're really excited about that. Special ed continues to be a growing need, and that is nationwide. It's not just here. We're seeing an increase in the number of out-of-district placements. And as we've discussed before, at a minimum, if you have travel, it's somewhere around $100,000 per student. It can be upwards of $400,000, $500,000, depending where a student goes. We have 40 plus kindergarten students entering our system through what's called CDS, or Child Development Services. That's the largest number that we've ever seen. We always have a few, but we've never had 40 plus before. And some of these students are coming in as pre-K students, as kindergarten students. They are already placed in out-of-district placements. So as soon as they arrive, we're already going to need to provide them or pay for that out-of-district support because it's been determined that that is their need. We need an additional speech pathologist based upon caseloads. The caseload max is 50, and we already have speech language pathologists in the district that are exceeding that cap. And based upon needs of students that we have arriving, we have 3 additional educational technicians. We are looking at adding 2 additional kindergarten teachers. So I'm hoping that maybe this is a new trend. But over at the Helen Thompson School and the Pittston Randolph School, we need to add additional kindergarten teachers to prevent our class sizes from being around 2021, which would be significantly too high given the needs that we see these students coming in with. So because we have our neighborhood schools, it is necessary to have three kindergarten teachers at each of those schools. Again, that could be a turning point for us, and we may be seeing kind of an increase in our enrollment. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Social workers, we are still having students' mental health issues continue to grow. We have a social worker funded out of our ESSER money or our ARP. It was the COVID money. That's coming to an end in September. So what we've done, you will see that we've reduced at the middle school a school guidance counselor in exchange for one of these social workers. So while there's two social workers, one is being funded by not having two school counselors at the middle school. So this will result in having 2 full-time social workers at the middle school and 2 full-time social workers at the high school, which is absolutely needed. They all have waiting lists. I've heard of some of our social workers. They have a waiting list of 10, 20 students. So we really need this additional support. And I will just say, in addition to these social workers, we also have in-house social workers from Kennebec Valley, Behavioral Health, or Spurwink. They also have counselors in our buildings that students can access. That is health insurance based versus ours we just cover. Instructional coaches, 1.5. Half of this is for the assistant principal's position over at Helen Thompson. We have a half-time of her position is budgeted. The other half has been in ARP funds, so we're looking at bringing that in. And the instructional coaches is something that we've had. They're incredibly effective in pushing forward instruction. And we have found them to be so invaluable. So we have one of those positions. We actually were originally proposing 2, but we've only gone with 1 because of the budget. We're also looking at splitting Gabe's position, the Director of Operations and Maintenance, into 2, with the Director of Facilities and Director of Transportation. And by doing that, we're able to eliminate the Assistant Director of Operations so that the fiscal impact is about $10,000. It's not huge, but that job is becoming so overwhelming with people working around the clock that we really feel that it is absolutely necessary to split that position. Looking at other things in the budget, a lot of this you can just see. I don't need to go through all of it. We do have some roofs. We have a dollar figure for some of the out-of-district placement. We have, in addition to the out-of-district placement fees, you can see the transportation by itself is $100,000. Our annual bus lease is up. There's an increase for our school resource officer, increase for insurance, and we have to continue to maintain our buildings. We do have some reductions. We have a grade 1 teacher at LER. Due to low enrollments from last year, we only need three teachers. So we're only carrying 3 teachers forward. We're looking at the counselor position that I've already spoken about, a reduction in science by a half-time teacher, 1 in English. Again, when we take into account our decline in enrollment, as we look at how we're doing scheduling, it has been determined that we can do without these 2 positions. We've also reduced a special ed position at Pittston Randolph, a transliterator, a multi-language teacher, we switched to an NTAP 3, And there were lots of other positions that were proposed that we do need, that other school districts absolutely have. Their teachers have these types of support systems with more school psychologists, with IEP coordinators to help with the paperwork and the organization. And we just couldn't afford it in this budget. So those were eliminated. With the IEP coordinator, we're going to try to be creative. We have some vacant teaching positions in special education that we've really been challenged in trying to fill. So we're thinking that maybe we will modify their job description to try to turn some into an IEP coordinator, hoping that that will make the jobs of our other special ed teachers a bit more manageable. So that's kind of a work in progress. So here's the budget. Nope, that's not the budget. Sorry. Oh, here it is. So this is what kind of makes up the increase. So you can see generally the large pieces. And the majority has to do with salaries, right? There's your salary increases. That's where we're getting the biggest hit. Then our out of district placements, our transportation, our capital improvements. We do have some roofs that absolutely have to be repaired, and you saw that. We have some exterior doors that are so rusted that if they're not replaced, it presents a safety issue in our building, because people can get in our buildings when our students are there. We need to have those replaced. Insurance, bus leases. Just to feel a big picture. And again, this is how it breaks down according to the warrant articles. Okay. And the proposed budget, just looking at it another way. And you will see I included that March 24, the CPI was 5.8%. Just to give you a general sense. And the impact for taxpayers with this budget. And local versus state. So you can see that 50% of our income or our revenue to help support education, just about 50% of that comes from the state. We have some carry forward funds that when we don't expend money from one school year, we have to use that money in subsequent school years to offset the impact for taxpayers. And so that's the 6.25. Then there's miscellaneous revenue, which would be like interest or gate revenues from football games, basketball games, that type of stuff. And then you can see how it's broken out per town. This is a slide that we always try to provide that shows where does the money go. The majority is in regular instruction, which is 40%, but what goes with that is you have special ed at 19%. You have the other instructional programs. Tell me again, off the top of my head, can you give me one example?
Student support is guidance, other instruction is co-curricular and extracurricular.
Right.
Facilities, right?
That takes up, you can see that's around 3/4 of the budget overall, or maybe a little bit less. And then the rest is the transportation facilities and then system and school administration. And then I provided just a salary comparison on the next slide. As I was talking about us needing to be competitive. As you can see, this is really all over the place. While we're higher than some or we're about the same at base. You can see at the top of the scale, we're higher than some, and we're considerably lower than others. So like RSU 75, that's Topsom. 18 is Oakland. RSU 2 is Halldale and Monmouth, and RSU 4 is Litchfield and Sabattis, that area. Here's another one that we provide. These numbers are based on state figures. The state makes these available, and it shows how much we spend per pupil compared to other school districts in the state. And so we are here. And what Andrea has done is she also has broken down a comparison by warrant line. So you can actually go in and see where we are. So for example, you know, one thing that I looked at is that the special ed, like our special ed is really high. When you compare us across the board, what we're spending per pupil for special ed is considerably less than other schools. So it just helps kind of frame the picture for me. So I get that bigger picture of what's really happening. Then how do we compare? And looking at it from a different perspective. So there are 258 school districts across the state. So when you look at our per pupil expenditures, we rank at 224. Special ed, we're 170. For my office, systems administration, that is, and that's with the board as well, we're at 224. Student and staff supports are 88 and facilities are at 153. And then if you look at it a different way, what does that even mean? I mean, I'm throwing out how are we in comparison? So what I actually created this for the first time last year, saying, okay, if I just pick schools around us, these are the three that are just, that are completely around us and our neighboring school districts. And you can see how much they spend per pupil. I took their student enrollment, calculated it out, and you can see that if where we are in comparison to where they are and what they spend, and how much more money we would have to raise if we were to match their expenditures or reduce, given the Augustus situation. So the other thing, we're spending a lot of time, board is spending a lot of time talking about facilities and some of the needs. Most recently, I submitted on behalf of the board a community fund grant. I don't know if it will be approved. And we sent it in for with a request of repaving all of our schools. Also looking at an outdoor track in the field house and hopefully having that all done. If it is approved, then the board would need to potentially come up with 20% of the cost, but the rest of it would be funded. That was a $2.6 million project that we would have to go up to taxpayers if that's funded. Other things that we're looking at, our gym floors at LER, Pittston Randolph, every year they're on the list, and every year we bump them. We just can't seem to afford it. At the high school, we are in need of bathroom renovations, locker room. If you've seen the catwalk, there is no question that that needs to be replaced. We're looking at some renovations in the middle school, and there has been talk about consolidated elementary school. We talked about that last year as a way of saving in operational costs. But that hasn't gone anywhere yet, and I'll kind of talk about why. And then there is adult ed. So this year, I think the registered and served learners increased from 40, I think last year it was 40 or 60 up to 80. So they have struggled to really recover after COVID. The number of participants that they had in their program, they just have not returned. But they've been spending a lot of time focusing on the academic side, the instructional side versus just some of the enrichment programs that they have available. So again, great standing relationship with Maine General, with our CNA program, a lot of online opportunities. And so the budget, while there is an increase overall in the budget, it's a 0% increase to taxpayers. And the one thing that we did last year that the board approved is that our adult ed program is now working collaboratively with RSU2 and with Winthrop. So we've developed a collaborative to kind of share services. And we're kind of waiting to see how that goes to decide whether we're going to truly unite in every way, or if we're just going to do it as a way of providing some administrative oversight and structure that will save us all some money ultimately down the road. Or at least that's the intent. To put on your radar, so next year when we come here, we'll be talking again about salary increases. There was LD 974 that it proposed increases, as you see at the top of the screen. However, the LD failed. Instead, it was pulled into the budget. All right, so we still refer to it as LD 974, but it's actually now part of the governor's budget. And so I just kind of wanted to share with you what that will look like. So at the present time, our ed tech ones are at 1545, I think. And so by next year, they will need to be increased up to 1875 at a minimum. So, and then all of our other support staff will have to be at 115% above the minimum wage. And so every single year, that has to be adjusted for inflation, cost of living. Okay. Then the other big thing that the board has been working on, new construction. The Department of Education, they've opened applications for new construction, and they're going to be due August 31st. And what we were told is, if you're able, submit an application for every single building, because once you have an application on file, you're held harmless for any sort of repairs that you make to your building. So if you're doing upgrades, it won't be held against you in a future application process. So the board has engaged with an architectural firm right now, waiting for their final proposal to come forward. They've reviewed all of the buildings, and needless to say, the high school goes right to the top as being an issue, and Pittston Randolph being also our oldest elementary school. So one idea potentially is if, say, the Pittston Randolph School were selected as one of the top schools to be funded, that would be the time that the state would want to engage in whether to have a consolidated school, and whether that would be supported by them or not. So we're kind of waiting, in my mind, we're kind of waiting to see what the state does, how they rank the schools before we decide to really move forward with more of the consolidated school process, because that way they pay for it versus it's all locally funded, which would be very expensive. Then the other thing that we're doing is the energy performance contract, and really looking at all of the schools to see if there's some lighting upgrades, and we're looking at LED lights in classrooms, and possible energy savings in other locations. Today I worked on the COVID grant, the ARP grant, and I actually had enough money left over that has to be spent by the end of September, that I pulled out drum roll, because this is news to people. I pulled out the middle schools project and I put it into ARP as part of my proposal so that we could have all of the classroom lights updated this summer at the middle school. And we would not have to, we wouldn't have to borrow for that, right? We'd be able to just pay for it outright. The button was pushed at 5:45, so we'll wait and see how long into whether that actually gets approved, but that's good. So we are moving forward. And we've done these in the past and they really have saved money. So the hope is to do the same. Last year, we talked about the strategic listening report. We're still in the process of finalizing it. Some of the day-to-day challenges of the job just gets in the way of actually putting it down on paper. But we use these themes to guide us, right? And when we develop the budget. So really looking at collaborations, and every year we keep expanding our collaborations with groups within the community. We are spending a lot of time, Angela, the staff, on really evolving our curriculum and our instruction. Staff are making incredible strides. Our student mental health issues, as I said, they continue to grow. And so that's why we have the additional social worker, and then educator sustainability. These jobs are getting harder and harder, and I'm certain that you've heard around the country, people are not flocking to education. They're choosing to go elsewhere, and it's really about to find ways of sustaining our existing staff and attracting new staff. So we are working on that as well. And that's what I have. So the referendum is Tuesday, June 11th, at 6 o'clock at the high school. So I guess I would open it up for board members. I don't know, Becky, I guess I'd let you take over to facilitate the meeting.
Okay. Are there areas in the budget that anybody has questions about? As I was watching it this time, there's a lot of terminology that gets thrown out about the things that we need. We need social workers, we need special purpose private schools. So my question, I guess, to you would be, would it be good for us to be able to explain what that looks like? Or are you satisfied with just those points? Like the social worker, what does that look like? Does that, and the social worker has appointments all day long, a waiting list of 50. Would it be helpful for them?
So Becky, what do they do?
Well, that's a question. Well, there, that's a question for an administrator. So I would love it if one of our administrators would jump in and let us know what our social workers really do.
Sure, absolutely. So our social workers 100% meet with kiddos all day long. They're absolutely packed. They see different kiddos within certain amounts of blocks of time. Some kiddos have higher needs. They meet with them maybe twice a week. So it just depends. Right now, the social worker that we share with our high school is so overbooked with the need that they're seeing kids almost bi-weekly. So our need has really increased. Our spur wing counselor in the building has a wait list of 20 kids already. We have wait lists for everybody else. They always find a way to fit them in, but our need is just really large. So having that extra social worker in our building will help make sure we facilitate the supports to our kiddos. And they're our number one, right? That's the business we're in, is the business of kids and ensuring their success and making sure that they have people to talk to when they need that is part of that.
So this may seem like a dumb statement, but what exactly do they do? Because you just explained that they speak to the students, but what exactly do they do for them?
Sure. So a lot of them actually set specific goals with the kiddos. They might have certain things that they need to work on. A lot of our kiddos maybe have trauma from their childhood or have experienced horrible things, or have different sorts of things that they're carrying with them, anxiety that impacts their want or desire to come to school and be successful. And so they usually set goals with them, and then they have different in their sessions. They talk about that. They have plans with them what is something you can take back to the classroom? They work with the teachers. Hey, this is what's going on with this kiddo. So it's really about trying to find different strategies of success for them while helping them work through those layers, right? That talking piece, you know what I mean? Trying to get them to discover that this did work for me and this didn't, so that they can keep kind of remixing that mixing bowl until they get the right cake, so that the kids kind of go out there and they shine.
In addition to that, they're also a licensed clinical therapist, so they're providing therapy services to students throughout the day.
Are there any, are there any statistics that the need for social support counselors becomes greater because of the economic needs of the family?
There's so many studies out there right now. There's definitely a relation to that. Right now, there's a lot of there's studies going around about social media and the impact that has on the mental health of our kiddos and the social connections, because it's different online than it is in person. And so there's so many things, but I do think that's definitely a part of it.
The only reason why I bring that up, and I think relatively simple, and please don't anyone comment about that, is every time, you know, I sit on the Gardner City Council and I watch budgets go up, the state, federal, local, school district, county. And it seems to me, every time a budget goes up, and we all do, then we're knocking a percentage of people off the bottom. And are we creating our own problem? Are we just creating an issue that, and I know this is very philosophical, that there's no return?
Just speaking personally about my own family, buying groceries right now is tough.
Right.
Paying my oil bill is tough, you know? And so if I'm struggling sometimes, right, just to make those ends meet, as I'm sure we all are, I can only imagine what some of our families are experiencing. So, you know, I think there's a study in there for you to explore.
Yeah, it just seems so, it's like the old adage, a dog chasing its tail. Everything keeps going up, and there is a great number of people, not necessarily in Gardner or West Gardner or in Maine, that just keep falling off the bottom of the ladder. I don't have an answer. It's just a question.
I don't either. Like I said, my focus is kiddos and making sure they have the supports they need. And so our response when we see that is, what do we need to make sure that they can be the best they can be?
And they're ready to learn.
Correct.
That's what we're working towards, is them being able to access their education.
Right. I feel like because we're in the business of the students, it's, everything is going up, but where they're supporting them when they're falling off. So of all places for it to go up, we need to provide that support.
I didn't ask this before and.
Just a second.
Sorry.
Were the elected or our elected officials invited to this meeting?
All elected officials?
No, ones represent Gardner, West Gardner.
Karen Montel and Craig.
Were they invited?
Yes.
Every elected official should have received a personal letter inviting them to this,
Not
yes.
one came, correct?
Not one came with.
Not one of them. I'm talking like our representatives and senators and.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, this is for MSAD11 representatives. Sorry, elected officials. No, I did not invite our state.
Well, I think in the future we should, because they're sitting in Augusta making a lot of these laws that you guys have to follow, but they don't fund them.
Yeah.
I think it would be important for them to see what we're sitting and looking at tonight. Just a thought.
Yep.
No, you're right. That's a question I bring up at the state school board meetings all the time, is when appropriations gets together, do they even look at what it costs? Or do they just throw numbers at it and it's like throwing 43,000 at the wall and seeing if it sticks, and then it becomes the rule and we have to do it. And who's costing it out? That's always my question. Who's costing it out?
So that, and then also, I heard at the beginning of the meeting that our enrollment is declining, less. but we're looking to hire another half-time principal in West Gardner. I don't understand that.
No, the person already exists, the position already exists, just half of the position has been funded in federal dollars through the COVID money, and now that the COVID money is going away, it's shifting into the local budget. Oh, Helen Thompson is the only elementary school that has an assistant principal. But they have an assistant principal because in addition to their regular population, and I think your enrollment's around 250.
Yeah.
They also have 2 special ed programs over there. They have our STEPS program, which is our autism elementary program, and they have our behavioral program over there. Because of that, it has been decided we really need to have that assistant
Thanks for
principal.
clarifying. I misunderstood the beginning. I apologize.
Sorry for not being
Thank you for
clear.
clarifying.
And that's housed there for the district, those special programs are there for the entire district.
Thank you.
Joanne.
I just wanted to ask, do we have group therapy for certain populations as part of the social work?
Ours says lunch bunches.
Yeah, we do worry groups.
Yes, Jeff.
Yes, speaking to the issue of the cost of things and the input of the state legislature into the cost of education. Having spent 8 years in the legislature, I can speak firsthand to what goes on. And I mean, it's kind of a snarky statement, but elections have consequences. The people of Maine vote for certain groups of people that go in and they do these things to us. So until the citizens connect the dots about how they vote and the people that represent them and what they do, these things won't change. I mean, I watched that happen over and over. That, you know, school boards came when I was there and said, don't do this. You know, this is gonna cost us money. And it would go fly through anyway because special interest groups and different lobbyists are a very powerful thing. But I mean, it's also ideologies. Different parties have different ideologies about how things should run. And you know, the cost of everything, you're talking about children falling off the bottom. Well, you know, the federal elections also matter because printing money endlessly and spending money endlessly causes, you know, terrible inflation pressures. And you talked about fuel and groceries, and we're talking about taxes here. But we have to raise the spending of the school budget because everything else is going up and you have to match it. So you're right, you're creating your own problem, but it's up to the citizens to recognize that when they vote, it matters. And the people they vote for need to answer the questions about what are you doing to us? Stop doing it. You know, I guess that's all I can add to this conversation.
Yes, Joe.
I think also if unless I missed something, it seems like salaries are one of the biggest places that we're seeing increases, and that's being mandated by Augusta, saying that you have minimum standards and you're required to meet those standards. So once again, as Jeff's saying, it is a lot of the damage is being done in Augusta and they just pass it down and it's you're required to abide by it.
I was just looking at something, there's also, I mean, you're right, there's still conversation at the state that we may be looking at another increase to teacher salaries. That I'm not sure if that will come back next year, so that the minimum salaries would increase to 50,000. And then there is a question about salaried employees. I'm still not certain as to whether this will apply to teachers or not. But as of July 1, and maybe for business people here, if you haven't heard this, as of July 1, 2025, any salaried person making less than $58,000 will be eligible for overtime compensation. So that is, I don't know that that's a Maine, I don't know. I'm guessing that's from Maine, but I'm not positive. So there's more to come. I'll update the board
I think it's
when I learn more. But that's another expense to be, just to be aware of, that's all.
And so a couple of things, school boards intentionally are not political. Our job is to watch out for kids. And I don't really care about the politics of it. What I can see is that it costs a lot of money to live. I don't want to blame any party, one party over the other. There are lots of pundits that say that wages have not kept up with inflation since the 70s. And things cost a lot more. It doesn't really matter how we got here, we're here. And our teachers are coming out of college with debt. They can't afford, our nurses are coming out of college with debt, making $40 an hour, can't afford to live, can't afford to rent, can't afford to buy, can't afford to pay their bills. And that's just our reality. And I don't want to be angry about it. I don't want to point fingers about it. I want to educate our kids. And in the most positive way we possibly can, so that they can find satisfaction and joy in their lives and be productive community members. That they're going to want to help make the world a better place. And I personally hope that as a school board, we can get off that spot of this is somebody's fault. We should all be involved. If we're not happy, we should all be involved, every single one of us, not blaming anybody. If you don't like what you see, get involved. That's the best thing we can do. And help our kids to be better. That's all we can do as a school board. That's what we can do. Yes, Kathy.
I just want to make a broad statement. There's no question involved in it. Because I think this is such a statement about how we feel about our children. And I think it would be very hard to put together a budget today. And I can't even imagine, it's a very complicated budget. And so thank you for the work that you and the board and I'm sure all the staff had to be involved in. And I just want us, I just always have to remember, how do we care about our children? And are we, do we want to cut this more and more and more? Because that's a terrible statement about who we are. And so I'm with you. I want it to look like we love and care for our children. Or kiddos, as you call them.
Yes, Joe.
So we can all sit here and we can all agree in this group that this is really all about the children and funding them. But as Jeff is saying, is maybe all of us in this room can afford the 10% or 15% that our town budgets are gonna cost. And maybe we're in a fortunate position, but what about those poor people that can't? And that's the tough thing, it's how do you balance we can pay it, no problem, but what about the people that can't? I mean, I know Pittston has $350,000 in accounts receivable. And I'm sure all the other surrounding towns have people that owe money to them, and it's only gonna get worse. It's never gonna get any better. And how do we juggle and deal with that part? Because everybody can only do what they can do. And I just can't imagine, when those people get their tax bill and they see it's a hard one.
I don't disagree.
Well, I think everybody can agree that it's an issue.
I think we have to, as we go through our budget here, we should be paying very much attention to the governor's budget. And we need to see where tax money is going and where the costs are inflating that. Because we have to take a look at what are the priorities of the state. And you would think that, infrastructure, education, all of those social commons that everybody takes part in, everybody needs, police force, firefighters, everything, that should be a priority. And we have to take a look at who percentage-wise is paying the most out of their income. And really kind of put it to our legislatures, you know, who among you got PPP money that maybe you didn't need, that the mom and pop business in my community could have used during the pandemic? You know, really start asking the questions of our politicians on what is your focus? What do you care about in your communities?
Right, well, there's a couple of questions that I appreciate the philosophy, but I have a couple of things I want to make sure I understand in case someone asks you a question. One is with the social workers, did you look at, do you bill Medicaid for them or private insurance for when the students see the social workers at the school?
That's an Andrea question.
So, do you wanna, you were
It
going to
doesn't matter.
speak?
I would go ahead, you did flip a coin.
So the answer to that is, no, not for the district employed social workers. For the other social workers that we spoke about, behavioral health and Spur Wing, yes, that is a model that they do bill students eligible for Medicaid.
Is there a way to bill for the school employees if they have the same licensure as Spurwink?
I think it's against, it would be not for regular ed children.
Not for regular ed.
No.
You can do it for special students who receive special services. But we've done that in the past and the rules were so cumbersome that we ended up being fined. It was not a huge fine, but there was a fine. And so we made the conscious decision to stop because the rules were just so challenging to abide by. It's my understanding that there have been some changes and that at the Department of Education, they are trying to develop a system, create a system that would support school districts so that those districts who are not billing might be in a position in the near future to be able to resume that billing.
Can I dovetail on what you're saying? So we cannot bill for regular ed kids, but what we don't bill for Medicaid for special ed kids, the state backfills what we would have billed with special ed money. So it flows through the 8279. So for those people who do bill, that revenue is lopped off the top because the special ed piece is based on an expenditure piece. So it nets the same. And Pat's right, before she got here, was it before you got
It
here?
was shortly after I arrived.
We had a full Medicaid audit, Medicare audit, and we were fined. And as a result, we were told that while the state of Maine Medicare main care billing remained the way it was, that we would never be able to bill because it's really a hospital provider model. It's not an education model like I think Vermont and New Hampshire have a different Medicare model than we do. The state's been trying to figure it out for years and they haven't. We've heard promises of them being able to figure it out, but it's not truly an education model.
Thank you. My other question is, on the slides where you said minimum wage is gonna be 15, and then your minimum wage is 15, it's gonna go up to 16.
1875.
And then it needs, so then you have to pay 125%, 115%. Then you had some hourly wages that said $25, which was way more than 118%. of minimum wage.
So no, what that slide is, if you're an ed tech, the salary is going to be, it's gonna be a minimum wage plus 125%. And then I was looking at the future, July 1, so I'm looking at the following budget year. And if the minimum wage is at 15%, I'm showing you that would be 1875, okay? The next section was for all other hourly employees. That's 115. And I showed you whatever that amount was, it was 17 something. And so then I listed what the current minimum salary is for all of our other hourly positions so that you could see where we ranked in comparison to the new model.
So not all the positions will get that pay bump.
Well, you know how negotiations go, you know, if others are seeing that type of increase, I'm sure at the table, the requests
ask
will
for
be
it.
made, and I don't know how that will all play out.
I was just wondering if you had already put it in the budget or not yet.
No, that doesn't take effect until July 1, it will be in next year's budget. I was just kind of giving you a heads up that here's another expense.
Thanks for that. The other question is, I know the city is planning on that, the 1% that the employer has to pay into the pool for taking time off and then the employee has to pay. Are schools exempt from that or
No.
No.
That's there too.
And then I also know that Denise was trying to figure out how many people are gonna take that and how much it was gonna cost in overtime, not overtime, backfilling. Well, in our case, it'd be overtime, but for you, it'd be substitutes. Did you put that in at all?
So let me answer your question. So there's is it statute? For those employees who are currently in a collective bargaining agreement that didn't expire before some.
2025, I think is the date.
So for those employees, they are exempt for participating in the main paid family medical leave. So they will not be able to claim it and we do not have our match in the budget.
Until their contract
Until
expires.
Until they
Okay.
renew it.
So we have a reprieve. So during this budget, we did not have to budget for those who are in a contract that's already negotiated until the 2025. Next budget year will be a different story.
Provided those contracts expire, we did that it was initially in our budget. It was close to a $250,000 increase. The individuals that we have remaining, who will contribute, it's just a small amount. Most of them are covered under the CBA agreements.
And that is one of the areas that we pushed back because we already have family medical leave and we already have staff members that are able to accumulate sick time. So as long as they haven't used their accumulated sick time, then their time out with family medical leave can be paid.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Thanks, Becky. I've been trying to figure out sort of how to phrase my philosophical ramblings and actually ask a question. I guess having seen a couple of the budget meetings or school board meetings in the past few months and reading the newspaper article as well, and listening to the conversation and the questions from the last hour or so, I didn't hear educators mentioned very many times. There were a couple of times that staff support and educator sustainability was a factor. But a lot of us in this room are an arm's length away or more from many of our students. The folks behind me have a much greater impact on them. And very few, if any, classroom staff are in this room right now. And they're the ones educating our students. So while everyone in this room puts our students first, the folks that are making that impact are underrepresented in this room. I know you all do a good job of that. We talk about modest salary increases, and I heard the words retain, sustain, and maintain quite a few times, which is important. Originally, the proposed budget was some 38% more than what it is currently, and it's been whittled down to 9.5%. Some arbitrary 10% cap was determined. But if the needs have been demonstrated and decided upon by the professional staff behind me, how is it reduced by 75% of what's actually needed in this district to support our students? And why are we worried about minimum salaries for our educators instead of working hard to attract quality, good, long-term educators that can educate our students? The article, for some reason, referenced a $400,000 property value in a lot of our communities. Some towns have more of those than others. But a $42,000 salary for a new educator, it would be about a 1% increase of their salary in taxes alone. They couldn't afford the house to begin with, let's be clear. But the taxes would equally impact them as much as they would folks on fixed income who've owned property for 40 plus years and continue to maintain and retain that. How does the school board handle the charge of protecting and supporting our educators as much as our students? Could be if there's an answer, please. If it's rhetorical, it's fine too.
That's something that we, as a negotiations team, really work at and battle with all the time. Trying to form my answer so it's articulate because I can use a lot of words.
Sure.
Can I offer a comment while you think?
Yep, sure.
I'll just say, Matt, when we have meetings and sessions with Pat and all her staff who are here, Usually we're provided information from staff and teachers that has been surveyed and provided. If we don't get it, we ask and they usually already have it. So we do hear from them indirectly.
Good.
They do get invited to meetings to share information and background, which is really helpful. And we have presentations that are usually throughout different curriculum meetings, finance meetings, so forth. So we do see them more often than necessarily at these meetings. As mentioned, they work endless hours and
Mhm, they do.
as do all these administrators who are getting
Certainly.
calls all hours of the night. And so I often am one of those people asking for that, and I'm a data person too, so I'm always asking for that as well. So just to offer your perspective from a board member on that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yes.
And just to add on to that, contractually, we can't ask them to come.
That's right.
No,
But I would love to be, because again, and that's something that not everyone knows, but all the employees work for Pat.
Mhm.
Everyone works for Pat.
Mhm.
So there's this really clear dividing line about what the board can do and what the administrators and the superintendent can do. So what do we do to support? We wish we could pay more. We
Yeah.
wish we could do all of those things. We know that many of our teachers can drive an extra 15 minutes and make $20,000 to $25,000 more. We know that. And being a really fun place to work with a really great atmosphere, is only a piece of it. It's
Doesn't pay the tax bill.
It does not pay the tax bill. And so we're looking at, a lot of young people coming out of college, with a lot of debt that will not be able to afford a home. I say to my own kids, you may grow up and marry and never have a backyard because you're living in an apartment somewhere. And that's a terrible feeling to have for our kids moving into the future. We can't fix that. We all recognize it. I can assure you of that we see it, we know it, and
Thank you. Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, and I appreciate all the perspectives. I didn't want my comment to be strictly about there being no educators here. It was not a slight on any educator. I would
didn't
not
take it that
expect them
way.
to be here, and I'm sure they were not invited to this meeting
Right.
for us to discuss the financial aspects of this, which are difficult. I do want to push back a little bit and find out to what extent we can impact that. Whether salaries, and they were more competitive than I thought they were going to be. The presentation, thank you, Pat, was more answered a few of my hot and ready to go questions about whether or not we're fully supporting our educators, as I personally think we should. But there still may yet be more capacity to do that and to make sure we've got a sustainable, long-term, full district full of employees that are educating our kids.
Yeah. It's an ongoing challenge. We have positions that we haven't been able to fill.
Yeah.
I think we had 10 ed tech positions that we were unable to fill throughout the course of the year. And that impacts teachers, it impacts students. When we are asking staff to not only do their own job, but to cover when we don't have those positions filled, or we're seeing a substantial increase as our other districts, we're all talking about it, in absenteeism rates. So when people aren't here for whatever reason, and we can't find subs to fill those positions, then once again, we're asking our educators, our bus drivers, it's across the district, to step up to help, our ed techs to help, our administrators doing lunch duty and recess duty and all of those things, because we don't have those supports. I don't have a good answer. I think salary is a piece of it, but that's not all of it. And it's hard finding that balance. Yes, we put together a budget of what we see as a need. When I think about special education and the need for another school psychologist, to think about those IEP coordinators, there's a need there, and not having those support positions puts the burden on our teachers, right? And those are positions that are common in many, many other school districts now. But it's finding that balance with what can we really go out to the community? I mean, we're all taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer too, right? And there's only so much that we can ask people to try to absorb in any given year. And we are well aware that last year there was a sizable increase. And so to go out 2 years in a row is tough. So there's no easy answer. We're thinking about our staff. We're thinking about what we can do, but we're also trying to balance that with what's reasonable. Reasonable, I'll put in quotes, for our taxpayers, because, you know, we can't do it without them, right? So, I'm sorry, I kept cutting off Matt.
I wanna respond, I'm keeping in mind who has hands
Don't
up.
worry.
I wanna respond to, when public education began like 1,000 years ago.
Right.
They were responsible for this many things. And over time, it's grown to this many things. And so as everything grows and changes, we need to evolve and grow and change with it. One of the things that has not grown and or changed is how public education is paid for.
Right.
There's, in my mind, a huge piece of the issue. I wouldn't want to call it a problem, but something that's interesting and needs to be studied. And I don't have an answer to that, but I am part of a study group that's creating resolution to present to find other ways to help fund public education, because as everything changes, and everything does, why does this never change? Why does this never evolve? Why does this never go to someplace else? This is what we have right now. Our needs have grown exponentially for our families, for our students, for our communities. They grow exponentially. And if our response is the same thing over and over, and we expect to get a different result, we all know that's the definition of insanity. So no wonder we all feel so ugly about it, but we have to consider and keep working on what can we do better. It's expensive, we all know that. What do we do to help it be better? And I want to be part of that. So did you want to speak to this, or?
It was, you covered some of the things.
Well, you cover the rest, and then I'm gonna call
Well,
on you.
Usually I write my comments down because I'll ramble otherwise. But I'm not from here. I moved here in 2017. And all the different comments that everyone's talking, and I was raised by an educator. You know, my dad raised 3 kids with a phys ed salary. And the house I grew up in was 1,500 square feet, and my mom is still there. And their property taxes are probably double for what I pay in West Gardner. I'm from Rhode Island originally. But, you know, the facilities are different and stuff like that. I'm not on the finance committee because I'd probably bang my head on the desk if I was. And I have an English degree, I'm not good with math. But it's every year we're doing the absolute bare minimum to not pass off the increases to the taxpayers, because everyone in this room, as we said, can probably afford whatever the increases to the property taxes are. And there's a huge portion of the people in these towns who can't. But in order to maybe bring more awareness to it, the people in this room are the ones who have to convince the townspeople of these types of increases. And the people, you know, saying people gotta get involved to talk to legislatures and stuff like that, that's all great, but again, in this audience, it's preaching to the choir. And the only people watching the live stream are the ones who are probably already involved anyways. So, but that's another whole problem in and of itself. But when I joined the school board pre-COVID, you know, I think there was 1 or 2 social workers across the whole district because we didn't have the problems then that we had now. And they're rough numbers, double the cost of a guidance counselor. So that keeps going up. And then all of these minimum wage types things. You know, my son's in the middle school and I would love to see, you know, the best of the brightest teachers to stay here. His homeroom teacher last year was phenomenal. She was a Bowdoin grad and stuff, and she's gone this year probably because she went back to New York City or something like that or got way more money. But it was just, what we're doing is just brutal. But the people in here are the ones who can make a difference in some way, shape or form.
Good rambling, Matt. Good
Sorry.
job.
That was great rambling. I appreciate it.
Rhode Islander.
Jill.
And she's pursuing a graduate degree in Washington State.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Oh, that's right. Maybe she'll come back.
Yeah, that was
So,
like almost
so
a free
I'm
ride.
thinking that one one of the points that were being made is, are the teachers being represented? Are the teachers being heard? Are the teachers, was that you?
Don't cry, Kathy, it's not
So-
that bad.
What a good
So,
icebreaker that
But
was.
aren't the teachers represented by a union? And aren't you dealing with, don't you really deal with the union? As far as representing the teachers?
So I think it's done at various levels. Yes, the teachers fall under a collective bargaining agreement. They have an association. They have a president. Angela and I meet monthly with the president and sometimes the vice president, and we work through issues. We talk, what's a concern, what's not, whether we need to address. So that has helped our relationship incredibly. We have a really positive relationship with our association. As Alyssa said, through the curriculum committee, we have staff who are frequently at the curriculum committee, doing presentations, right? Sharing the work that they're doing. Angela works very closely with our staff around teaching and learning and professional development. And there are frequent meetings where they sit down and they will review curriculum, they will review data, and the teachers do have a voice. That's where they're able to share. They meet with their building principals on a regular basis. And the information that they share with their principals are then brought back here. I meet monthly with all of the building principals. And in those meetings, I hear about any concern that might be going on with the association. So that's a long-winded answer. But yes, we try to work very closely and make sure that they're a collaborative part of the process. We can't do what we do without our staff. And we have some wonderful teachers here, some wonderful support staff members. And it's really important that they collaborate and have a part in what we do. They see it in a different lens, a different way than we do, because they're in the classroom every day, and it's important to hear from them.
And because of that work that you do, that the administrators do with our teachers, we have negotiated 3 teacher contracts with,
Yeah, maybe.
I think 3 teacher contracts with just
us at the table.
just us at the table, no union representation, none of that. And we talk very candidly about, because they're members of the community as well. So we talk very candidly about what will work. We don't argue. There's no animosity. We just try our very best to work together, and they bring the point of view, the perspective. Pat and her work with the administrators, they bring all of that to the table, and that's really made for a really very positive working relationship with our union employees.
And that's a sign that it's not just about the money.
Correct.
So I know Jane has some, I
yes,
just want to do a time check. It's 7:15. We were hoping to kind of keep it close to an hour or so. I know there's baseball and other commitments that people have.
If you guys need to go, so you can be a mom and be whatever, go right ahead. And thank you for coming and being here this long. And I hope they win, Molly. Thanks. Okay, Jane?
I don't like to blame everything on COVID, but COVID was a major factor. When I was teaching and I could have parents in my classroom working with me, would you listen to those kids read? Would you help them mix paint over there? I was part of the community, they were part of the community. They saw what went wrong in the school, what the bathroom wasn't working. They saw that, can you wait here? I gotta go out on playground duty because so-and-so was out today, that kind. They saw what was happening practically in the schools. When we closed the schools because of COVID, that ended. When I went to a bean supper and I'm sitting next to Johnny's mother and saying, boy, he did a good job on that report, but maybe we could look at math a little bit. She was very comfortable with that kind of working. We have to get to the parents, the voters, the taxpayers, and let them know that we are living beings as the school is. We're not just a figure and a percentage on the voting booth. We gotta get to the parents and not just this group who I don't understand all this percentages and 60. I can't imagine a mom or a dad who are struggling, they don't even wanna sit down and see what a 14% increase is, or they have no idea. So we need to get to the parents. That's my
We
point.
want our parents in school. We
But
want them to.
I know we do, but we gotta maybe think outside the box and think how are we gonna get them, put an ATM machine outside of a school so they see the teachers there late at night working on the classroom.
The feedback I've been getting has not been, they want volunteers. So I know some volunteers that volunteered and they said, we're good. We're all set.
So you're, Tiffany, do you have any?
I'm sorry, that you're saying our volunteers are saying,
I know a couple of volunteers that have reached out to volunteer and they were discouraged from volunteering.
well, I'm very sorry to hear that. I know certainly we do have some regular volunteers coming in on certain days. To encourage them to call again, make the request again, because we do want to be inclusive to the community.
Make sure they call the office, not the teacher, right?
Well, that was kind of the conflict. When they
Yeah.
talked to the teachers, they were very encouraged. It wasn't
Yeah.
the teachers that they felt discouraged from.
Gotcha.
And I didn't ask enough questions like names and all that.
Right.
It wasn't about that. It was just, I agree with Jane that there's a good resource in volunteers.
But I'm not talking bits in school. I'm talking the high school and middle
All of it,
school.
yes.
Yeah, we need to get teachers working with parents, not, and administrators certainly, but teachers who are with that kid every single day. And when that kid comes in and says, I had trouble last night, I fell off my bike and I hit my knee, and so you check on that kid the next day, how's your knee today? And then you talk, they need to know you have a heart, that you're not just putting red marks on a report card.
Well, I hope to think that parents do know, those who have kids in the school, that we have a heart. We have some great relationships that are developed in the buildings between our staff and our students and our staff. We are struggling to have parent volunteers like our PTA. I know in
Big time.
some buildings, they have
I'll
one
come back to
person
you
in
in
the
2 years.
PTA, despite efforts to reach out and involve parents. So I mean, I hear you, Jane. I don't know the solution to solve the problem again. People are so busy. Part of it is they're just so busy, they just don't have the time necessarily. I don't know, is there an elementary administrator who would like to respond, or anyone?
No, there's no answer at this point, I don't think.
Well, I think some of it, I mean, I'll go back to when I started teaching and I was a kindergarten teacher for years. And when I first started teaching, I was a stay-at-home parent. There was one person working and a stay-at-home parent, and I had volunteers all the time. By the time I got done teaching and moved into administration, it required 2 parents to work. And so we don't have stay-at-home parents who are able to come in during the school day. So we do have a few that will be able to do that, but it's harsh. It's hard. We'll ask them to volunteer for field trips, and they love to volunteer for field trips. But they're taking a personal day for that. They're taking a day off for work. And they do it because they want to be involved with their children. And so we do have a lot of volunteers that way. But I can just tell you from the time I started to where I'm at now, I mean, and we're talking the expenses. It takes 2 parents to run a household. They have to work. So we just don't have the volunteer base that we used to have. I think parents would love to volunteer, but again, they have to put food on the table and they have to work. So the ones that are able to will call and reach out. Some will have a day off here and there and they'll say, hey, I've got this day off, can I come in? And that works. But again, I think we're just seeing they have to work.
Is it smiled upon? I have no idea because they work for you. Is it smiled upon if a parent has a question that they can email the teacher? Is that something that's?
They have a question regarding their child?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's their first
Those
line of defense.
communications
Yep.
happen all the time. And if they don't get their question answered, absolutely go to the building
Escalate it.
principal.
Yep.
But yes, that happens daily. Okay, we're at 7:20 now.
Jane, I appreciate what you said because I know we want and need to be welcoming.
We're here for the kids, but we also know the parents really, they want to feel welcome. So I want us to be a welcoming place for everyone. Does anyone else have, oh, Jax, you've been so quiet.
I just, this has been my second budget year and it was, harrowing and frustrating and, you know, you have to make decisions that make you feel really ill because you want to do the best and you also want to not bankrupt your town. And, so it's been clear that, well, the funding formula is inadequate and that something needs to change. So what we have the opportunity to do is, if each of us were to reach out and share that perspective with the higher elected people, the people that are representing us on a state level and on a federal level and say, this isn't working, these are all the ways that it's not working right now. Because if they get professional opinions like ours, like what we're seeing on the ground, maybe we'll have some schedule for something better sometime.
I'm sorry. Hi.
That's all.
And you're right, Jack, we work with this formula, the ED 279. And I work with school board members all across the state. Most school board members that I've spoken to do not know how to read the ED 279. So if you don't know how to read your funding formula as a school board member, then you don't know how to push back. We are fortunate that we have Andrea who walks us through every single line and leaves us terrified at the end because we realize what it costs and what we don't have. And those are really important realities to know. And I don't want to speak poorly of other superintendents or other school board members, but it really is surprising to me sometimes how, not even sometimes, how many people don't know the formula. And it's complicated and it takes a hot minute to look at it year over year so that you're refreshed when it starts again. But I think part of it is if we want to push back, we need to know what it is. And that's a big piece. So we're not going to keep you here. There's no effort. So I want to thank you all so much for coming, for your questions. If there's something that comes to you in the middle of the night, wait till morning and email one of us and we'll be more than happy to get answers for you. But we appreciate your support. This has been by far the best turnout that we've had. So thank you so very much for coming out and it's really good.
Thank you guys for your support on your
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, we will. Another fire to put out. There we go.